Welcome, welcome back as we continue together on our journey of discovery, exploring in particular the frontier of our souls and spirits, which for many of us is a largely unexplored realm. In a somewhat counterintuitive process, we find that we begin our exploration through the purely physical act of breathing and breathing mindfully. As we prepare for this week's Break to Breathe, I find myself reflecting on the Independence Day weekend we have just observed. The most obvious and overwhelming images include the return of fireworks, entertainment, travel, and parties of all kinds. I confess that while it was hard to resist the exuberance of a nation hungry for release, the photos of thousands of concert goers packed together, jumping and clapping and singing with absolute abandon, gave me pause. There is something else that gave me pause this 4th of July weekend. I have been sobered and saddened by the fault lines in the construction of our country that have been revealed, particularly in the 16 or so months since the pandemic began. We are not what we thought we were or who we want to be. And perhaps most devastatingly, we do not share a common vision as a nation as to what and who those entities are. I believe that our reality is far more complex and difficult than we have realized. I find myself thinking about our poet laureate, Amanda Gorman, and her recitation of the presidential inauguration, and her recitation at the presidential inauguration just 6.5 months ago. With optimism and realism, she uplifts many of the issues that face us. She manages to do this with both seriousness and hope. I thought it might be interesting to use some of her passages as inspiration for our meditation, and thus to take stock of our souls, even as we take stock of our nation's soul. So let us find our meditative postures. Let us sit easily but attentively. Let us unclench our hands and lay them gently in our laps, possibly palms up, or lay them gently on arms of our chair. And as we unclench our hands, let us let go of our chins, our shoulders, our necks, our tummies that frequently hold tension in them, our legs, our toes, anywhere in our body that is holding on very tightly. Let us see if we can release those tensions and find an easier, softer place to be. And let us breathe. That first full, deep, mindful breath that we send into our bodies, and imagine it filling every corner, every crevice, every hidden place. Let us fill them with our breath, all the way to the tips of our fingers, to the tips of our toes. We might hold on to that breath for a few seconds. And then release it, possibly on a slow count of 7, possibly in one. And if you even want to make sound with it as a way of just letting it out. And you might feel like doing it differently every time, or every time you sit for a meditation. Let us breathe in. We might breathe in to a count of 7 also. And hold for a few seconds, 3 or 4, and let it out again. And even pause at the end of the exhale. And inhale again. I invite you to continue to breathe. The poet begins. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just is isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. I believe she has touched on common personal themes as well as national ones. The quest for light in the midst of darkness. The overwhelming sense of loss that so many of us carry now, certainly, but at various times in our lives and for various reasons. The idea that we are not broken, but unfinished is a gentle approach to the harsh issues that we face unrelentingly as a nation. Even as we might see brokenness where she does not, I can embrace an attitude of unfinished with which to go forward. In fact, we learn in Jewish tradition from Rabbi Tarfon Omer, Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor. Rabbi Tarfon would say, it is not incumbent upon you to finish the work, but it is not allowed either for you to desist from engaging in it. We don't have to finish, but we're not exempt from doing it. There's also the concept of brokenness in our tradition. The mystics actually saw the very creation of the world as a breaking apart of the vessels that God sent into the darkness, vessels of God's own presence, of God's own essence, that could not withstand the pressure of entering a different realm. And so they shattered, they broke apart. But everywhere in creation, we might find shards that we can lift up and restore to their original wholeness. That is what a mitzvah does. It lifts up the brokenness. It helps us to restore an original unity. Thus, as Jews, we feel a responsibility to continue the work and to heal the brokenness of our world. Let us breathe deeply, fully, gratefully, and realistically. We might imagine light shimmering in front of us. We might imagine the uplift that our work might create. We might feel an internal healing through the simple act of breathing, with which we might reach out to others. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge a union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. I find so many Jewish ideas, universal ideas that animate most faith traditions in her writing, in her formulation of the difficulties that we face. She also has a way of making time-honored ideas sound fresh and young and new. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. Imagine the possibility of really doing that, of making these words a reality, not a vision of the distant future. She does it many times throughout her poem, The Hill We Climb. We are striving to forge a union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true, that even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promise to glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare. It's because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We might even use it as a mantra. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. I love the way she has crafted this idea, a principle of Jewish study and even survival. As in every generation, we have reinterpreted the laws and customs of our tradition. We have done so that they would be relevant and meaningful to our contemporary lives. That is how we have survived throughout the generations, when every other civilization has declined and then disappeared. We have had the imagination, resourcefulness, and insight to make our tradition live in vital and essential ways. And when that tradition needs repair, as in the restoration of women in and at the most important moments of our history, when they were certainly present but unaccounted for, we address that omission with serious scholarship, commentary, interpretation, and even poetry of our own. It's the past we step into. And how we repair it. The hill we climb, if only we dare. From the Psalms, Esa'inai el Heharim, I lift my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. The hill we climb, if only we dare. Let us breathe in the vision of ascent, the possibility and promise of a better place, a higher plane of existence. With that breath comes the energy that animates our souls, that helps us contemplate an ascent. So while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be. A country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens, but one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left with. Let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left with. That is worth breathing into our souls. That is worth holding in the very essences of ourselves. And when we breathe out, let it be a breathing out of that which would deny our intentions for good. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover. And every known nook of our nation and every corner called our country, our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge, battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light. If only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it. She offers a vision of tikkun, of repair, of healing, of correction, and even perfection, not of the world, tikkun olam, but of our country, what we might call tikkun haaretz, repair of our country. This is a vision with which, not surprisingly, I suppose, I resonate. It makes me wonder, what could it mean to celebrate our 4th of July with a commitment to engage in tikkun haaretz, repair of our beloved country, rather than seeing it solely as a day off for fireworks, parties, travel, and social gatherings? There is nothing wrong with our current practices. They are wonderfully enjoyable and bring people together. But perhaps they too are incomplete. There is also an opportunity for sober reflection, engagement, and improvement. If only we are brave enough to see it. If only we are brave enough to be it. Let us breathe in these thoughts for the last couple of minutes of our time together. Another mantra. If only we are brave enough to see it. If only we are brave enough to be it. By way of our conclusion, and even as a blessing going forward. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust. For while we have eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be. A country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens, but one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left with. If only we are brave enough to see it. If only we are brave enough to be it. God bless. I look forward to seeing you next week.